funny mood. Well, I got mine. Woman, you got yours too. Just trust in me, like I trust in you. But as long as we are together, and that should be so easy to do. I don't get so excited when I come home late at night. What good is a love affair if you can't see eye to eye? Never, never, never love me. If you don't know me by now, you will never, never, never know me. Yeah. Oh, if you don't know me by now, you will never, never, never know me. For all the things that we've been through, you need to understand me like I understand you. But I know the difference between right and wrong. I'm gonna do nothing to break up a happy. I don't get so excited when I come home a little bit late at night and you're acting like children and you wanna see me cry. If you don't know me, you will never, 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 you will never, 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 never. If you don't know me, but now you will never, 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 never know me. Well, if you don't know me, but now you will never, never, never know me. Yeah, yeah. I think they don't know me, ne? They don't know me, right? They don't know us. Kichwa masakane kwa bathabanga mpaka madiata la skatala na gola thalaga mashotho shothe ngwatala ganna bororo la tseba zone 1 masakane zone 1 lesijeo said if you don't know me but now you will never, never, never know me. Okay. Baba anyone from Lebohomo? Oh, I see you right there. Clap your hands, ladies and gentlemen. The band, let's give it up to the band. They're from Lebohomo. And together we are Mahlatse Vocal and the vocal band. And we're going to give you music today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, there is still a light that shines on me. Shine until tomorrow, let it be. Oh, let it be. Let it be. Let it be. Speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Oh, let it be. And let it be. Let it be. Oh, let it be. And whisper words of wisdom, let it be. Arre rappeleng tapello e buzie di pilu charina di tlale tabo fela bana tshwara nang le batswadi ba lena gore le khutso malapeng a lena gale o di bona jale fasile mosadi emelela o itshware ka bogale and jwale ke nako ya go ema ka boikgatšo go be jwalo go be jwalo go be jwalo go be jwalo emela lentšulete ye fela gomme go be jwalo go be jwalo go be jwalo go be jwalo emela lentšulete ye fela gomme. Let's give it up for the guitar, ladies and gentlemen. What's up? When the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, and there will be an answer, let it be. And though that may be tired, there is still the light that they may see. There will be an answer. Let it be, yeah, 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 yeah. And let it be, and let it be, yeah. And let it be, oh, and let it be, yeah, yeah. Speaking words of wisdom, let it be. When I found myself in times of struggle, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Thank you. You've done so much. All right. Sorry. So like we said, we are just giving you music. The program will be starting very soon. In the meantime, just enjoy the music. In a few minutes, the program will start. Thank you. You've done so much for me, I cannot tell it all. Say, if I had 10,000 tongues, it still would be enough. Everybody say, come on. Shukuna one more when you hear completely. no one Maribo. Hey! When you hear completely. Put your hands up together for 1, 2, 3. What shall I render to Jehovah? For he has done so very much for me. What shall I render to Jehovah? For he has done so very much. No, what shall I render to Jehovah? For he has done so very much. Put your hands up like this, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, let's do this. I want to see everybody do this. Come on, say. Hey, 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 hey. One more time. All right, I want to give you guys. I want to give you guys a sample of this. Are you ready? Do you want to hit that? Just give him a few notes, né? A few notes. Just a few notes. Let's give a round of. A round of applause one more time. Say, Nara, Nara, Narekele, Nareke, Nara, 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 Okay, wait a minute. You wanna do that? You wanna do that? Let's give it up for the guitar. What shall I render to Jehovah? For he has done so very much for me and you. What shall I render to Jehovah? For he has done so very much for me. Are you enjoying the music? Come on now, are you enjoying the music? I said, oh, 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 oh. Come on now. Oh, 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 oh. It all comes down to love. Oh, 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 oh. It all comes down to love. Oh, 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 oh. We're gonna go back to Jamaica, man. Say, Jamaica, man. Come on now. Say, Ibo. I want to see everybody dancing like this. In the days of Jamaica, we remember Bob Marley. Hey. One love. One heart, let's get together and feel alright. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel alright. Said, oh, 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 it all comes down to love. Hey, oh, 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 oh. It all comes down to love. Oh, 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 oh. It all comes. Oh, it all comes down. Chisa! Ibo! Come on! We're dancing back to Jamaica, man. Ayo bayo, 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 ayo bayo. Ayo bayo, ayo bayo, ayo bayo, ayo bayo, ayo bayo, ayo bayo. Said oh, 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 it all comes down to love. Oh, 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 it all. Wait a minute. I think it's only fair if I give you a drama, eh? Do you guys want to dance to a drama? You want to give them a drum? Okay, we're going to listen to the drum. Let's give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Ibo. A round of applause one more time, ladies and gentlemen. Woo! See. Ah. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, oh, oh. Hi-yo, hi-yo. Hi-yo. All right. You want to give them that bass. You know bass people. So this is how the bass guy. Come on now. Let's give a round of applause for Benny on bass. Hayo bayo, 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 hayo bayo. Give yourself a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Coco. mame Okay, we're gonna do this, but I want to see what's about Cortez. I one, and then what? Let's say yeah, today we are Virgin Active. Virgin Active. I say Virgin Active. Hi, Congo, Mame. Zanjalo, Hebusene, Nansambamba. Ashevele Zanjalo, Hebusene, Nansambamba. Ai Congo Mame, Congo Mama. Ai Congo Mame. Ashevele Zanjalo, Hebusene, Nansambamba. Ashevele Zanjalo, Hebusene, Nansambamba. Hai Congo Mame, Murahu, Fati, Hos, Lata, Jesse. Hello, come on, Oza. Yes, Fati, Oza, Fati, Lata, Natabamba, Ashevele Zanjalo, Hebusene, Natabamba. Hi, Congo Mame, Congo Bamba, Congo Mame, Congo Bamba. Shevele Zanjalo, Hebusene, Nansambamba. Shevele Zanjalo, Hebusene, Nansambamba. Shevele Congo. Thank you. Thank you, Nigeria. Thank you, Ethiopia. Thank you, Zimbabwe. Thank you, Germany. Is it Germany? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. I love you guys.
Good evening. Good evening. Let me try again. Dumelang bagaetsho. That's better. My name is Musi Khasiekwi. I am a Methodist minister here in Polokwane, and I have been asked to come and lead a short devotion, and therefore I am going to be reading from Genesis chapter 45, starting with verse 1 that says, "Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, 'Send everyone away from me.' So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?' But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, 'Come closer to me.' And they came closer. He said, 'I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord of all his household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be nearer me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flock, your heads, and all that you have. This is the word of the Lord. I take this moment and thank the opportunity that has been given to me to lead the devotion, and say I so wish next year when we gather like this, we bring young people. We bring young people. There's only one here amongst us. So and he will soon be an adult. So we need young people so that when we are sitting like this, it will be like sihlele embawuleni sizomamela abantu abadala telling us, you know, and passing to us the experiences and the things that we need to preserve going forward. And therefore, we are gathering at a time when things are just blowing up in Johannesburg. It was the street that blowed, and cars were, you know, the soil, the earth just opened up, and people nearly died. This morning we woke up to a tragedy of a fire that has taken more than 70 lives. And all these things are because of lack of what this foundation stands for. And therefore, we should not be where we are. Had it not, you know, if we have had and lived according to these standards, we should not be experiencing such things, such loss and tragedies. And therefore, it's my prayer that we do that. Just 2 points quickly. Joseph is revealing his identity to his brothers in Egypt after he was sold. And therefore, he's there and he meets them. He's been meeting them for some time as they come and buy food. And he's looking at them, they don't know him. But there was this moment where he could not hold it any longer. And the Bible tells us that he asked all those who were not affected by the conflict that happened when they sold him to go out. And a foundation like this simply calls us as black people, as South Africans, to be in a room like this and tell each other what went wrong, who did what. And that's what Joseph did. He allowed the Egyptians to leave the room and stayed with the ones who were, you know, affected by the conflict, and said to them, this is me. And therefore, as black people, it is about time that we close the door, remove other things and other people, and be able to tell each other where did we go wrong. Deeply so, and saying, this is what happened. All right. You know, we always need to find God in every mess. And Joseph tells them that, you know what, you guys made wrong decisions, but out of your wrong decisions, God turned them into something else. You sold me, you didn't know. It was a wrong decision you have made. But God sent me here. And therefore, I want us to be aware, at times we punish ourselves for the decisions we made so much that we don't want to move. It's about time that as we repent, we also realize that out of the choices we have made, God can create something new and better in our lives. And therefore, he does that, and he revealed his identity. We will not get our country right and our society as long as we are still having masks on our faces. Joseph had to remove the mask of being an Egyptian and say to his brothers, I'm your own. And therefore, if we want to fix things, we really need to be true to ourselves. And saying, I am struggling. I am an alcoholic who is struggling, who drinks in a corner, and now and then I slip and fall. Let's tell the truth so that we can heal, so that we can be able to get our country right. He removed the mask. We are moving around with people with masks here who behaves like leaders, yet they are not leaders. They know that they are just covering themselves with the cloak of leadership, yet deep down they are not. And therefore, a gathering like this calls us to do that, to remove the mask and be true to ourselves and be able to get our country right. Secondly, the last point, he then says to them, go and tell my father, the one that you lied to, go and tell him I'm alive, I'm not dead. And therefore I hope and I pray that this kind of gatherings will teach us to be honest, to remove the masks, but at the same time go out and change the story. Because some of us, we are the ones who created the story and made it what it is today. And people still believe in the lies we told them. And it is us who must go back to those that we lied to and saying to them, here is the real story. And may God be with us tonight as we gather, as we reflect, as we become honest, as we remove our masks, as we struggle to make an impact in the society we are in. And come, let us pray. Thixo awunanqaleko awunanqibeko ukho endaweni zonke, ukho ngamaxesha onke, nalapha nje ukho. Siyabuva ubukho bakho, siyacela kuyo njalo ke Thixo ukuba ungene nokungena kwethu, usikhokhele modimo wa rona. Re tla ho wena phirimaneng ya letsatsi le, re swabile ka dintho tse etsahalang. Re swabile modimo wa rona le hore re iphihlele re le batho ba o re phelang, empa hona le mehlolo e etsahalang mahlakoreng a rona. Bana ba robala ba saja, batho ba shwa modimo wa rona, empa re etsa ekare ha re bone. Re mema moya wa hao o halalelang modimo ya lokileng, hore o tsikinye maikutlo a rona, o re hopotse hape seo re kileng ra ba sona le seo re ka kgonang ho ba sona. Re modimo wa rona, a foundation like this, may you bless this vision. Modimo wa rona o nno e hotetse letsatsi le letsatsi o e rothisetse phoka ya mehauhelo ya hao, hore modimo wa rona mohlomong a le mong fela ya ka bonang lesedi ya ka phonyoha phela. Mme re modimo wa rona e ba le rona o re etelle pele. Challenge our thoughts, touch our hearts tonight, and as we live here, may we be people who are recharged and ready to make a difference. We put everything that needs to happen here into your hands and ask you to lead and bless us. We ask all this in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Eka re ka bina pina ela ya tsieki eo ka maru a pula phallang le kupetse mabele.
Akilije kele mubi kili ya kheseran naharaba etsa chocolate little money iyabutokwa namoli fasinjo Wampada wabatisisa kadi limo awampumana awampidisa angwana mo adi mojo
Thank you. Thank you very much for the musicians. You are making our night appear more and more like a night. And thank you very much for gracing this occasion. My name is Mauchi Pataki. I'm here to welcome you tonight, but also to acknowledge your presence here tonight. As Moruti Siekui has said, I think, my brother, you have set the bar too high tonight. You have made us to start thinking, even before we get right to the core of the reasons why we are here. Because you are talking about a nation that all of us who are here belong to. You are talking about a country which is our heritage. You are talking about leadership and how we want to be seen to be good South Africans. And I'm quite happy that you started that way. It's not for me to do vote of thanks, for sure. There are those who are still going to do that. Mine is to say tonight we have gathered here because there is reason to do so. Every one of us would appreciate that unless we begin to talk to one another, we have got a nation that is slipping out of our fingers. When it started, we didn't think it would become something quite serious. that it would even necessitate that we need to meet and begin to talk about the future, not only of ourselves or of our children and our children's children. That unless we begin to rise and we search each other's minds, this country is gifted with people who could think, who could conceptualize, who could create, who are innovative. And unless we begin to explore that space and see what is it that we mean to one another as people, it means we are becoming irresponsible if we do not do that. And for sure, the coming generations are not going to be quite happy with us. They will be told that they were here when the country lost its direction. They were here. They are a part of a generation that saw a country slip off from their fingers, and they didn't do anything about it. So the Foundation for Leadership Excellence wants to occupy part of the contribution we could make to try and salvage this country. And tonight, it is one of those nights that we have assigned ourselves the responsibility to talk about these issues. Those who will be talking to us tonight, I need to acknowledge them, are guests who are here. They will be introduced properly at the right time by those who with the responsibility to do so. But for me is to say I acknowledge the presence of media. I acknowledge the presence of people who are teachers in our schools, who are faced with daily challenges of a nation that has got much to learn rather than to lose. There are lawyers among us here, people with legal minds. There are people here who are in the public service, whose daily responsibility is to ensure that people receive what is due to them in terms of public service delivery. We've got politicians as well, people who have taken leadership of the public space as politicians. We've got people who are technical in training, those who know what is required to put a building such as big as this one together. So we've got professionals among us, in a sense. We've got academics. The chairman of the Council of the University of Limpopo is here tonight with us. Ntate Nefolovot. I see the HOD of Agriculture is here with us. I see other political, people who have come. I see the church, the clergy is here. And we are not going to say it is so-and-so's part to reconstruct South Africa. We are going to say, as clergy, this is our responsibility. As public service, this is our responsibility. As politicians, this is our responsibility. As business people, this is our responsibility. Because among us, as we will be doing the vote of thanks and so on, you're going to realize even among us we have got business people who are constructing this nation. So everyone is here tonight. And let us make this night a progressive night in terms of participation and talking. I'm happy that Reverend Siekwe, you're raising a question about young people, and I think you're correct. The foundation is challenged to do something about that. Now, finally, part of my responsibility is to present to you the moderator of tonight's session. And I've got a profile here that looks so rich for a night so rich. Mrs. Bongiwe Zwane, it's a seasoned internationally recognized journalist. He's working as a prime-time news anchor for SABC at the time that we are in. SAFM Weekend Views host, Asikhulume, and let's talk. This is where our interest is. Asikhulume. SABC, that which is SABC's first flagship show. He has got experience in printing, radio, and television news, and he has worked in several newsrooms, including the ENCA, where most of you might meet her on the screen. Newsroom Africa, Power FM, Sowetan, and Sunday World. So, for sure, more than the media houses she has worked for, the majority is where she has featured. Now, if you are in that space, you have got certain responsibilities that you exercise. And among such responsibilities is that Mrs. Zwane keeps up with developing stories and breaking news. I think you are aware in the country we have got a time when we just say this is breaking news. And that's her responsibility. To facilitate discussions and interviews like she's going to be doing tonight. And this include conducting research even on various subjects. And therefore, we are in good hands tonight. As an anchor, or the editor, or managing editor, he has worked as a founding input editor for Newsroom Africa, where she led a team of reporters, producers, and assignments, and soon was promoted to managing editor for the channel, where as the leader of the output team, she was responsible for the final product on air. So when you watch news, there is someone who is the final product of what you see, which means line might be standing with number 1, number 10, but by the time you see what you see, it means it has been approved to go on air. And at a certain point, she was also a weekend prime news anchor for the same channel. Breakfast news anchor, some of you would meet her there. Power FM, she used to compile, read the bulletin on air, and also subbed copy from various desk writers and field reporters to ensure that it's ready for air. What I'm trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, I'm trying to say we have brought an expert in what we have asked her to do. She started as a field reporter and soon rose through the ranks to be an anchor within the ENCA and joined management team as an assignment editor. Now here are the career highlights of Mrs. Zwane. She has brought her husband, Mr. Zwane is with us tonight here, just to come and also grace our occasion and give the necessary support that is required of any husband. So, former president of Nelson Mandela's passing, career highlights. That's what she dealt with. The aftermath of the Marikana massacre and the Marikana Commission, you would remember. Exclusive interview with people like Jesse Jackson, Mama Madikizela Mandela's passing memorial service was conducted by her, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu's funeral. These are big events, and they all fell on her shoulders. And as we are building her career, we do not want to take these things for granted. The recent funeral of Mrs. Juada, Jesse, and first State of the Nation address at the Cape Town Hall, City Hall, following the torching of Parliament. You know, this country is full of fires. Even this morning we are talking of a fire. Is that a fire we're talking about in Johannesburg? Yeah, so we're talking about fires. Almost every other month, something must burn in this country. And it has been going on and on. And it's no fun what we see our country going through. the South African elections, both local and national. Now, before I come to an end of this profile, I also need to indicate that Mrs. Zwane facilitated for the Lord Maduka lecture delivered by former President Kgalema Motlanthe, the Cost of Activism Dialogue, News Africa, Advancing Patriotism Dialogue, which must actually inform why we are here tonight. We are here because we love this country. She didn't tell me what SAIBPP annual convention stands for, but at least I know what the Black Management Forum annual conference would stand for. And over and above that, she got achievements: Investigative Journalism Certificate, Vet School of Journalism, Duke University Media Fellow, ENCA Departmental Award, and the MEPAD's Most Influential People of African Descent under 40 class of 2022. So, in a sense, she falls among those who are able to cause influence. To the extent that you got an award, Bongiwe, I think we must celebrate you for that, this particular award. Can we just appreciate this? And I am in no doubt, Bongiwe, that you are going to do well tonight. I've seen you do well before, and we look forward to that. Over to you.
How did you guess that's one of my favorite songs? I almost sang along. Almost, but I didn't want to ruin the evening. You know, there's certain things we can do and there's certain things we leave to the professionals. Good evening to you all. Sanbonani, Dumelang, Absheni, what else? Konje? Dimadekwane. And she happens to be my former boss, so I must be in my best behavior. So that's why I'm recognizing abantu baseTsomo. Hey, Ntate Moruti, happy we are not being used to being introduced like that. That's pressure. I always run away, but thank you so much for that humbling welcome. I was actually asking myself, are you introducing someone else? Who's this person who's done all these things, you know? Because sometimes we just chase, we just work, and you forget to pause and to just simply say, this is the road that I've traveled. And I think that MyPad award is something that I still question, you know, myself to say, did I really get on a plane, go to the United Nations and fetch an award for the work I've done? And I think that's one of the things that we take for granted, the mic and the platforms that we get blessed with, as to how much influence those platforms are. And this evening it's about exactly that whatever conversations we're having here, as Moruti has said, we hope that even if it's one thing that you take, it is to remind ourselves that patriotism is not always passive. Patriotism is not always passive. And sometimes people mistaken it for that, right? That all you do, you just simply take. And you simply say you love this country. And you just simply keep quiet and you say you love the country. But when you love the country, what is your responsibility? Because ultimately, before we leave the house, ethics are in place. In your home, ethics apply. And today we cover all aspects of it. Whether it is going to a hospital and you are expecting good service, whether it is going to Makelwane's house, you're expecting that it takes a village to raise a child. Whether it is going to the media and you're expecting impartiality, that when you talk to me, I am not leaning to a certain side. I am going to give you a full hearing. What does it look like? And so when we talk about ethics, it is a conversation that a lot of people describe ethics as fluid. Sometimes they say it depends who you're talking to, and you'll get to understand. But there are certain things that when you think about, when you research the topic of ethics, you kind of get a common thread. And you're talking about integrity, you're talking about morality, you're talking about the value, you're talking about principles, you're talking about fairness, responsibility, conscience. Fairness, what does it mean? Fairness to who? According to who? Today, as we speak, the president is in the Johannesburg CBD. Lives have been lost, over 70 of them. And this afternoon, getting a briefing that building was last inspected in 2019 because it was hijacked. Over 40 men are among the dead. Around 10 children. Bodies of over 20 women. There are still body parts that they need to contend to see as they test who do they belong to. These are the only recognizable people, by the way. We still don't know if there are others who are burnt beyond recognition. This is a Johannesburg CBD that not so long ago had Bree Street explode. This is a Johannesburg CBD that we're still waiting to find out what happened to the torching of Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital. So these are the things that we talk about when we're looking at the ethics and the erosion of sometimes the systems. But at the same time, we're talking about mothers who are leaving babies between the ages of 1 and 7 in a shack alone and go to a tavern to drink. They come back, the kids are burnt beyond recognition. Neighbors did not even hear as much as a cry because the kids were either sleeping or had inhaled smoke and they were out already. Could they not leave the children with anyone? What happened to it takes a village to raise a child? We're contending right now in KwaZulu-Natal a few months ago. An uncle of a child is sentenced to life for raping his niece. The niece reports the first time to a goat is thus presented to the mother as a form of apology for what happened. Unfortunately, she gets raped by the same uncle again. And now the law comes in and sends the uncle to prison for life. These are but some of the conversations we've begun to have at our dinner tables. They are pointing towards an urgent situation. It's SOS. But are we responding to them with the urgency that is required? Does the church understand where it fits in? Or is the church in itself having an identity crisis when we still have pastors that are accused of horrendous acts towards their congregants? So where does the church fit in? Does the church even still have a voice in our democracy? What kind of voice does the church have? What conversations are we having with our young girls who are contending with decisions whether or not it'll make them popular to sleep with a guy and break your virginity before you get married? And then, what conversations are we having with our young boys who are themselves in a situation that appears to not know where they fit in? Are we even talking to our young boys? Or is the conversation towards the girl child? Where do we begin to address this issue of ethics in fixed society? And I'm hoping that with all these questions, we are going to be able to at least get to a certain part of providing some answers. I'm sure you've got a lot of questions. And those questions that you have, please keep them close, because we are going to be taking them during the course of our panel tonight. And I'm not alone, not an expert in anything. The only thing I know how to do is to look at that thing and speak. So it's always amazing when I just have a camera in front of me. Hey, Mara, when a room is full of people, I just start having June, July. Because every night, all I have is a camera and myself. I don't know whether you are watching me eating steak and pap and what you are saying, whether I look ugly. I do not hear you. Now tonight I am going to look at your reactions, unfortunately, or fortunately, you never know. But I'm hoping that we'll have a compelling conversation. Let's be honest. I think the one thing we're missing is honesty. It's time to be brutal. Because you know what happens when a child comes home and there's a wound? You must clean it first. The process of cleaning is not a nice one. If you don't clean it properly, it becomes septic. Now, let's have an honest conversation. As honest as we possibly can be, because when we're having an honest conversation, we are a step closer to understanding what we need to deal with, where everybody needs to fit in, and where we go to. So without further ado, I am going to call the people I'm going to be asking questions. It's my favorite part of everything. All the time, when I'm told a guest is sitting in front of me and I'm about to ask the question, I am the most excited. Because questions get answers, we learn, we interact. I know more about different people every day, different sectors. So for me, that's the best part of my job. Don't you wish you were me, to get paid to just ask questions? So, you know, the first speaker that I'm going to introduce, I was telling him earlier that his CV, you know, Habari, hey man, this room is too small. You know, when a CV can move from Polokwane, you don't even know which part you take, which part you leave out, because if you read his CV alone, it's the entire evening. That is how much of an impact he's had in all of our lives, and that's Dr. Musiburi Mangena. He was the president of Azapo at some point, and I need you to let me in on a secret before I finish reading Dr. Mangena. Afterwards, tell me, where did you find the time to do all of these things? Because like Ospat and I were telling you earlier, you don't look a day older than 40, so we need to talk. And at some point, he's now the chairperson of the BCMA in exile. That's the Black Consciousness Movement. He's the national organizer of the BPC. He's a member of parliament. And we saw him, make a whole lot of contributions. And I remember when you were looking at what was happening in our education sector at its infancy, and it's been, formulated and all of that, and you think of the people who pioneered some of the things that we are watching today, you think about his role as a Deputy Minister of Education, his role as a Minister of Science and Technology. And while he's doing all of that, please note, while he's doing all of this, he has authored 8 books. 8 books. The latest one being We Can Fix Ourselves, Building a Better South Africa Through Black Consciousness. And I'm so interested in that because that is something we need to talk about, particularly in the context of ethics. And I'm going to ask you to please hold your round of applause because I'm going to ask that we clap for everybody at the end. Hey, and then the next one. Him and I have had a whole lot of conversations on air when I would sometimes push him to a point where he says certain things and he says, but I didn't think I was going to talk about that. And I'm like, Dr. Fiken, I'm taking you there. Now, hey, where do I begin? Apart from always calling you and bothering you and asking you to please give me political analysis, and I say do not hold back. But today, that's not what I'm asking you for. He's a public figure, that's Dr. Soma Dr. Figen, who has held various leadership roles in the public sector organizations and as a scholar of public intellectual who has influenced public discourse, institution building, and public policies. He's currently the chairperson of the Public Service Commission of South Africa, as well as the chairperson of the Indlulamiti, South Africa Scenarios Board of Trustees. Talking about other things. And he's a visiting professor at the Nelson Mandela University and the president of the Michigan State University Africa Alumni Network. Now, he's received several honors and awards in South Africa and abroad, and one of these is the honorary chieftaincy that was bestowed on him in Ghana. So, do we say Bayete? What do we say? Nana. All right, now we know. And then our next speaker, our Honorable Silelo Donald Selamulela. He comes from Bochum in the Bloberg municipality in Limpopo province. He holds a master's in public health, University of Limpopo, a certificate in economic development. He's worked as a director, monitoring, evaluation, and policy research at Limpopo Youth Commission Office of the Premier, 2007 to 2012. And he's the member of the University Council, the University of Limpopo, and a member of the ANC's Provincial Executive Committee, and as a spokesperson as well. And he's currently the member of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress. And I left her for the last because, here's a very heavy introduction that I'm going to do here. Not only is she my former boss, but she's also somebody that pushed me as a journalist to ask the questions that not a lot of us were asking. So every time you would go out on a story and you think, oh my goodness, I've done the best. And she goes, oh, is that the best you can do? And you're like, but I got everything that everybody got from the press conference. I've put everything there. And she says, that's where the problem is. You're telling me the same story that the SABC is going to tell you, that is going to tell me, that whoever else is going to tell me. What does ENCA have that is completely different? And when I saw her, when I was asked to come to the SABC, hey guys, now I was ducking because I was like, this woman is coming. And now I'm going to be on air. So every day she's going to be like, why did you not ask? Why did you not read? So that's why I left it to the last. So that even if it doesn't go wrong, you don't give me the side eye like you're doing right now. Her name is Patiso Makopeni. And she has over 2 decades of strategic, operational, and editorial leadership experience in the media sector with expertise in multimedia broadcasting, And she has held executive management and editorial leadership roles, including editor-in-chief and group executive for the SABC News and Current Affairs, and acting SABC Group executive for television and head of terrestrial news services at ENCA. She lectured at the University of the Western Cape and the University of Cape Town, and she's the chief operations officer at the Begesisa Center for Health Journalism. She's a Menal Duke University Media Fellow and Bloomberg Media Initiative Africa Fellow, and she's the member of the World Editors Forum, a council member of the South African National Editors Forum, and chairs its Education and Training Committee. Now, these are some of the things that she's done. She holds a BA honors, and of course, she is now, I'm telling you guys a secret, she's a PhD candidate. So when she's done here, she's going back to her room. She needs to submit, she was telling me. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask all of you to come to the stage, please, so I can ask you questions. Please, let's give them a round of applause. Abantu kudala bengivalela indlela. Besithi andiyonto futhi ndiyaboniswa. Ngoba ingoma ngaphakathi kwami ibandisa ibani lokuya nokuvuka kontu nalonwabo nungapheliyo. Tuthandaza uyivele ngoma isokuselela uphefumulo wakho inike ithembele isha. Tathandaza uyivele ngoma isokuselela uphefumulo wakho inike ithembele. I must book you so you can wake me up nje in song every day, so I don't have to hear the alarm go off, just song, you know? Especially when I have to wake up for the SAFM show at 3:30 on Sunday morning, and I have to negotiate with Jesus and say, why did you give me this? Is it a blessing or is it? Every Sunday we have this conversation, Lord, is this still in your will for me to get out of bed at 3 in the morning in winter and come back? But you know, when you're on the road, somehow you just get on with it. And I think tonight is exactly about that. Muruti said earlier on in his opening that, is it going to, hey, please pass me my phone, thank you. Some of the questions that we ask ourselves are because we are contending with things that we had done in the past, but we shouldn't be looking at the past, thank you. We shouldn't be looking at the past only, but we should also be thinking how to fix. Where do we begin to have the conversation of fixing? And I'm gonna delve right into it because it's an important conversation and they're each covering different aspects of our conversation today. And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Figen, because you had a very significant day today. And the day is speaking to the heart of this public service, where it's going, the vision, everything. And I wonder for you, the reflections as you look at the ethics conversation in the public sector right now. Is it one that is evolving towards getting better, or is it a regression?
Well, thank you very much, program facilitator, and also greetings to my fellow panelists, to the foundation leadership and the leadership here. What is happening in the public service is a reflection of what is happening in society. There is no insulated bubble. If society is in a state of moral decay, so is the public service. Because the ecosystem that produces public servants and the homes they return to is the same. What I think we have done as a country, which is what I call the original sin of our democratic transition, we were fascinated with the hardware at the point of transition, the constitution, the infrastructure, electricity, RDP houses, which I call the hardware. And we forgot one of the most important things ever, the software. We have this beautiful thing, but it cannot operate. And if it operates, it is now infested by a malware, a virus. For us to reposition ourselves, as you know, when you go to that, mobile phone store, they say, unfortunately, your phone is infested by a virus. You will lose all your data. And a new software will be put in. I think we've reached a point where we have to accept that we have to unlearn in order to relearn what the challenges of today are. But there is hope, not all is lost. I often say to people, if Germany was reduced to the ground during the Second World War, today it is producing cars leading in many areas. If Japan in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was incinerated, today they resurrected. If Rwanda was contending with genocide as we were going on elections, who are we to despair?
And I want us to talk about that, pardon me, I want us to talk about that in detail. And firstly, before I come back to you, how do we guard against this despair? Because it's seeping through. And Patties, I'm going to come to you on the point of this despair. How much of a contribution would you say the media is making? Because we are often accused to say all we do is circulate what is perpetuating despair. Do we look at ourselves?
Yes, we do. Good evening, everyone, and good evening to my panelists. I actually want to start with the fact that the tendency is to look at the news media, and yet the media goes beyond what the news sector provides. And in fact, much of what talks to morals, ethics, values, and norms is in the entertainment space. And we forget that part. What stories do we see in our entertainment content? And how do those stories reflect on us as a population? When you see, and I'm going to make this example about your Jola 99s, and you can look across the genres. What is in the heart of those stories? And why do we get excited about that content at the expense of what we want to see as a future of this country, being youth? So in the context of the question that you're asking, so I just wanted to give you a broader scope that we don't just look at the news media, you look beyond what the news media provides. the news media is an institutional field, has its own norms and values. And in that space, the rules are defined. So basically, you have parameters within which the news media operates. And the fundamental responsibility for the news media, in fact, the first obligation of journalism is to the truth.
Yes.
And the first loyalty of journalism is to the citizens. So if there's a sense that we keep telling the same story or the depressing story, that's what we do as journalists. You hold the mirror to society. We don't create what we show. It's there already. So how do we walk away from what is the reality and tell stories that don't exist about how good is our society doing? And in fact, if you talk about the urgency to deal with the issues now, if the media walks away from reality, how do we deal with the urgency if we don't spotlight it? So these are the issues that we need to deal with as we engage in these conversations. And in fact, I remember at the time we were both at ENCA, we used to call, in fact, there was an excitement to be in the news, the primetime news bulletin. And in fact, the people who were against what they saw as if it bleeds, it leads, were saying that, in fact, they used to call that bulletin crime time bulletin.
Yeah.
It is crime, but where does the crime come from? It's not manufactured by the media. It's the reality that the citizens of this country are facing. So you cannot hide that story, particularly if you talk about dealing with the urgency to address the issues. So the issues around how the media holds the feet of those in power to the fire, it comes to play. And when we talk about the feet of those in power, we're not only talking to government, we're not only referring to government and the failings that we see and the mismanagement of the country and the economy that we see. We're talking about business because business seems to escape media scrutiny. There's very little that's being said about the negative externalities that are being brought to bear to the population. Look at what is happening in Johannesburg, the CBD, the fire that's happening there. Who owns that building? Why was that building abandoned? Who is the owner of that building? Why is that person not responsible for what has happened in the Joburg CBD? And you can look across the board where business is concerned. The Zamazama stories that we have just seen, again, the shootings and all the stuff that we see, where are the mine owners who used to operate there? What happened to them? Why do they leave the mines unattended to when they abandon the operations? So these are the questions that the media reflects what is happening in society.
And I'm going to come back to that point because it's quite an interesting one. But Dr. Mangena, one of the things that is coming through, and particularly from Dr. Figeni, which I don't want to lose, is the fact that the public service is a mirror. We should not be separating those public servants in all these offices from what we're seeing in society because they go back to these homes, right? But we grew up in a time, at least I did, where it takes a village to raise a child. I was everybody's problem, not only my mother's problem. But it seems along the way, the value system has changed. Values are lost, but also we then go back to asking the question. The country should be modeling certain values. Communities should be modeling these values, but are they clear what they are?
Absolutely. They are clear. All of us sitting here are aware of the values of our communities. We are socialized to recognize that this is the way society ought to be. They might not have logic. I mean, when academic training is in mathematics, you don't say, therefore, this. We're socialized to know that when this evening we are given food. I hope we are going to get some food. We are not going to take it and go to the toilet and eat there. We eat in here. And if we need to go to the toilet, we don't instead do what we are supposed to do in the toilet here. And so we are socialized to know what is right and what is wrong. And this guides our lives. And we don't even have to ask. The law comes after. You know, someone was asking, was asking us the other day, how do you know that human beings are equal? Yes, how do you know that Professor Fikeni and Musibudi Mangena are equal? But we have made, as a society, we have made the assumption that all human beings are equal. And when we go and write the constitution and write laws and so on, and even when we work in the civil service, that he said, we work on the basis that we've got to serve all human beings because they are equal. And so these are very clear, and those that are deviant and do wrong things that my colleagues were talking about, the building that is owned by the government, and it's hijacked, and the government apparently can't do anything about it. It's a tragedy. And so you go on with the...
Honorable Selamulela. Unfortunately, you know, we keep hearing this conversation, and it then comes back to, you know, not only community and how communities are socialized, not only how, when we look at the civil service, we think about what happened, where were the ethics eroded first, where did we start? You know, this decline that is being spoken about that we cannot seem to arrest. But a lot of the conversation also goes back to politics. And how politics also appears to have changed over time in how people perceive it to be. And I wonder, for your, you know, from your vantage point, how would you describe the relationship between politics and ethics in 2023?
No, thanks, Bongi, and greetings to my fellow panelists and the leadership of the foundation and our colleagues who are present here with us to dine with us. As Dr. Mangena is saying, we will also be dining. But look, Osbongi, the truth, which is a reality, is that the current lot of challenges that we face, both as a nation and as a people, indeed are as a result of the migration of ethics from our politics. And I think we need to concede to that. And the truth is that you can't speak politics without ethics. And I think Mahatma Gandhi would have said, one of the deadly sins is politics without principle. Yeah. And this principle that you speak about, you can't speak principle without ethic. Now, and I think Ndatifikeni makes a very important injunction that whatever you see happening starts with the society. Perhaps the question we need to be asking at this point, both as a people and as a nation, is how best, or what are the things that we need to be doing to invite ethics into the body politics of South Africa. And this is not only limited whether to the ruling party or to the opposition, also across the board.
But is there space for that?
There is a space. There should be a space. And the space should be created. Remember, politicians are a product of our own making as a nation. It is us who elect and make politicians to be leaders of a society. Yeah. It is us who, at a particular point, we should be able to say, no, we need to attend to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because if we do not do that, we are leading to the death of a society. So we have a responsibility ourselves, and I think is what Ntate Mangena is saying, and all panelists are saying, that we need at a particular point to ask what is our fair share as a nation to to the collapse of ethics, not only in politics, but in the society across the board. And you would have heard that this thing is starting to migrate, whether in academia, whether in churches. We have seen scandals exposed by the media where people are given degrees, people are given this and that. So it is not only limited to politics, but of course politics, because politicians are a leader of society. How they are judged must be above, they must be above reproach. And that's where we are starting to miss a point, and something ought to be done.
And I'm going to come back to talk about what then ought to be done. But if I can get another mic, if possible, just I'll bring it back, I promise. The thing for me is that, Dr. Fiken, if ultimately then this particular civil servant is leaving, this public servant is leaving home, in the space that has been described, this is a community where we're seeing all kinds of things. They are going into an office and they're bringing all of that with them to the office. And they then get to contend with certain political decisions that are made that are contending with their own ethics. In light of all of that, they have to think of their children who must eat. And someone says, sign a document. And they say, sign this document, knowing very well that the signature there means this particular individual is in trouble. But it happens. And I wonder what kind of environment have we allowed as South Africans for that to fester and to continue growing and to become the norm to say, you must have imali eChocho, generally.
Well, I do think that what people bring from home as a baggage is further contaminated by the environment at work. Where I think it all started in its new iteration is the evolution of a patronage network in politics and other sectors, wherein the collapsing of institutions and the deployment of people because they were loyal rather than competent. That, to me, is one of the biggest challenges that we faced. Initially, it might have started well-intentioned. When new ruling party came in, they had to get people they trusted ideologically and otherwise in order to dislodge an apartheid bureaucracy into a situation where the lowering of the bar. Remember that you are not even dealing with now a ruling party per se. You are dealing with a factional segment where you were not even loyal to this or that ideology. You became a member of a person. At that moment, your patriotism, your constitution, your ultimate goal, your public that you have to serve is this person, not the society, not the constitution. When this person has a baby shower, you must be there because that's your key performance area rather than what you have to do at work. So this collapsing of institutions, all of a sudden now, at SABC, you used to know if I approach this institution, these are the channels and these are the policies. But once you collapse the institution, you didn't have to bother approaching those policies. You said, if I catch the big man, I'm done. Same in the department, same at ESCOM, same in many places. So what has evolved is parasitic tendency towards the state what can I get from it rather than what do I give to it. But what is most important in this situation, all kinds of corruption reports now have just shown how bad this thing has become. Remember here, even the politics and the public servants of yesterday, if you went in the 1990s, you knew when you said this is a DG, yeah, this is a minister, chair of the portfolio committee. Then things started declining. You saw in this city, Polokwane, when that cohort of leadership was removed, they were taken by the UN, by private companies and so forth. If the leadership of today was removed, where do they go? Now it
Maybe
becomes...
Silamulela can answer that one. Maybe you will know where they go.
We have created an ecosystem of corruption. Not long ago, my fellow commissioners Ehonya will remember, in KZN, there were reports that about 17% or so of councillors are requesting National School of Government and others to assist them on how to read and write.
Yeah.
Which means they are doing the oversight. They say we're in charge here, but they are not sure what they are in charge of.
Yes.
They still have to be taught what they were running over.
And there's an employee in the Western Cape who has been on sick leave for 7 years with full pay.
No, that is far more better.
But do you see, we are now having a conversation that says this is better
In fact,
and that is worse. It's unacceptable, all of it.
In fact, I want to give you a shock therapy because I often use this one. There is a person who came to the PSC to demand some payment. He had been on suspension with full pay for 12 years. The person started the first degree, the second degree, articles, everything, did business and so forth. And one day he heard that there were some bonuses, I think, which then leads us to something. And we are now writing to Cabinet to say by October, everybody should come back. In other provinces who have gone, this person has been out for 5 years with pay, and departments, without flinching, they say, oh yeah, we forgot about that one. Now, that is the state of decay that we have to deal with. And this is costing, I think, 240 million. And this country doubled its sovereign debt in the last 5 years. And some estimates are saying we're paying 1.2 billion rands per day to service that debt. I just want to give you the context.
And then at the same time, we're sitting with councils that are fighting about who should be mayor and get access to resources, when people on the ground are contending with the very access to a basic thing such as a toilet. Sanitation is in the Constitution. It is access to a toilet. It equals dignity. And yet we hear of someone who should be serving these institutions not being there for years, months, decades even, and is comfortable to get that salary.
Which is your tax.
That's where I'm going. Because I think that's a conversation we need to have, Dr. Mangena, because ultimately for me, and I'm sure for many people, it speaks then to what we have come to know as the culture of turning a blind eye. It doesn't impact me, therefore. I leave it for government to sort it out. I leave it for the politicians to sort it out. But if I know that this person gone next door is doing 1, 2, 3, 4, it ceases to be my responsibility to either report it, because it's either I am afraid that the police are going to come after me because I'm going to be known as the snitch. Or at the same time, I'm choosing to say, you are choosing your peace and focus on your family and that's it. But how do we get back to that point where it's all our business?
Yeah, because, you know, we have lost it. In fact, we lost it in 1976 when we let children lead the struggle for freedom. So the adults lost control, either at school or in the home and so on. And any society that is led by children and the adults are no longer in charge has a problem. Number two, we went too far in 1994. You know, we transitioned from terrible oppression and dictatorship against black people to a situation where it's laissez-faire. Everybody can do whatever. We moved from a society where there are no rights to a society where everybody has got rights, and that's all.
As some people would say, "Gama itangaze,
Yeah.
yenza noma yini."
Yeah, and children tell the teachers when they give them food for homework that I won't do it. So what are you going to do? Yeah, what are you going to do about it? Thirdly, let's tell the truth. You know, we move around saying, hey, Moroa, we are in charge. We are not in charge in this country. We got democracy, but the economy and everything else, the wealth of this country is with other people. So we are fighting over tax. This is the vast majority of the people we want. That's where we can eat, not the economy, but what other people have done. They give us taxes, and then we fight over them. 90% of this population is fighting over, yeah. So we can only eat from the state. So that's where we are if we were to tell the truth. And so we stand around there, we are in charge. We are in charge of what? we are not in charge of where we are now. We are not in charge of Polokwane, we are not in charge of the banks, we are not in charge of the insurance companies, we are not in charge of the mines, we are not in charge of the...
Who is?
Maybe Tate Silamulela will tell me who is in charge. I'm going to come to you in just a moment. I want to know who is in charge because that's quite a big thing to talk about. But, Sis Pat, it's so difficult for me not to call you that. Forgive me. There's something, you know, we talk about. There's a lot of it, and yes, when we cover conferences of political parties, we come. There's factional battles. There's what is factions. But over the years, the media is also being accused of being factional, and it's not part of our ethics. And I wonder is that a fair assessment of those who are outside looking in? Or is it an unfair assessment for them to make about the work we do? It's a fair assessment, unfortunately, and it shouldn't be the case. Similar to what Dr. Fikeni said about the public service, the news media is a product of its environment. It is a product of its environment. If you're going to see things going wrong elsewhere in society, that's exactly what you're going to find in the media. And not only that, we have what you just said now about being factional. We have been found wanting about the quality of reportage. If you look back to the stories that came out about the South African Revenue Services and the Rogue Unit, we have been found wanting. And the fabrication of those stories involved people outside the media. So I'm trying to show you that we are a product of our own environment. While in the past, the media, you have your veterans in journalism who were in and out of jails because of the quality of their reportage and the stuff they were reporting on during the apartheid era. They were sent to prison. There's a new prison now for journalists, and it's self-imposed.
Yes.
On Monday, I was part of a workshop hosted by SANEF with the support of the United Nations on safety and wellness of journalists. And the first question I asked, if you didn't fear losing your job, what is that one story you would tell that would impact society? If you didn't fear, these are the new prisons that journalists are facing. It's job security and recognition. All of a sudden, we have journalists that want to be celebrities. In fact, we have celebrity journalists now. They overshadow the stories they tell. Their personalities overshadow the stories they tell. So this is the problem that we have. So the issue of
Before, I
factionalism.
don't want to lose that point. Are they created by the bosses? And before I even go to members of the public, because members of the public talk about the work we do all the time. And that's why people never understand when I say to them, I'm a journalist. I just happen to do my job on television. Now, you then walk into a newsroom because Ubongiwe is a timid journalist who never speaks out, who doesn't hang out with the bosses, who doesn't go to the boss's office. She's the one that's not going to get the celebrity status. And every second, there's a praise in the WhatsApp group about a story she did every 5 minutes. Juxtaposing that with her colleague who goes into the boss's office all the time to chit-chat, to have tea, to have whatever. And her stories are always lauded every day. And that celebrity status gets here and it starts creating a problem in the newsroom. And that's why I'm asking, are they not a creation of the system?
There are two things that we always have to be mindful of. It happens in business as well, and I've been in that space. You get people who get recognized. Their work gets recognized more than others. Not because they are doing better than anyone else, but it's because of their proximity to the bosses. It cuts across the board. It's not only in the newsrooms. Yes, that celebrity status comes with the validation that these people get all the time. And then it extends to the public because the public says the same thing that is said in the newsrooms. And we end up with these characters that have forgotten what it means to be a journalist. They've forgotten what it means to be a journalist. And what has happened with what you've just said about factionalism and the obligation of journalism being to the truth is that you rather go to your prison that you've self-created because you don't want to look bad to politicians. And when you say to people, you'd rather be unpopular and do your job as a journalist than getting recognition for something that you know is against the grain of what journalism is about. So what has happened with the evolution of ethics, because they've also evolved where journalism is concerned. And in fact, I still have a problem with the nebulous term of ethics, because we just assume that everybody understands what ethics is, and we assume that we have the same understanding of what ethics is. And fundamentally, what are the baseline principles that inform what's ethical and what's not? Sure. Because that's where we need to go. If you are going to talk about individual ethics, it means you need to break down the principles that you need to teach children at a very young age. You're not going to teach them ethics. You teach them the principles which are going to inform their ethical conduct. And we are not there. And in fact, you even wonder, what is the ethical code of this country? Sure. We have the Constitution as what is supposed to be the moral signature of the country. But do we have a collective understanding of what the ethos of South Africa is as a nation And in fact, do we have a nation? Or do we have a structural arrangement and an administrative arrangement that has these groups of people who call themselves a country, but do we have a nation? And what is the essence of that nation?
And I'm going to ask Dr. Mangena to respond to that. Sure. That is, yeah, that's a moment to think. Do we have a nation?
So if you talk about journalism and all the stuff that's defining the ill conduct of journalists, think about how they are supposed to be in terms of mass media now, not just news. Journalism, in fact, the media in general, has the cultural authority to disseminate shared norms and values of the country. If we can't define them as a country, how is journalism going to look like?
And I'm going to come back to that because it's quite an important one to have, because you even talk about the self-imposed prison. Some of us are even having a prison when it comes to social media, because we are so bullied on a daily basis, depending on who you spoke to. There's an interview I did, I was bullied for days. It is either a part that's going to laud you to say, they're now calling them what? You are CR17 or you are RET, something, whatever.
I was Stratcom, I can't remember.
Yeah,
the number.
I straddle across both. Depends who's swearing at me on whatever day. And that's a self-imposed prison that we go into, and I want us to talk about that because it also, when we come back in the next round, because it speaks to also some of the ethics that we are now feeling not protected in doing our work, and as a result, a lot of us have had the conversation with ourselves where we want to quit journalism because it's not worth it. Sometimes, but when you wake up in the morning again, you think about the country and you say, no, I'm going to do it for South Africa, which is where I'm coming to, Honorable Member. You have a number of questions to answer. Who is in charge?
No, thanks, Frankie, for the question. You see, when our forebearers met on that particular fateful day of the 26th of June, 1955, in Kliptown, to adopt what would then become a blueprint of a South African society or an ideal South African society of the future. At the backdrop of their understanding has been that the people must be in charge. That's why they agreed holistically across the board from all the hawks of our beautiful country, including from the SADC region, that the people shall govern. But then what happened is that when we get to the struggle, the negotiation came, Tata Mangena will know in Tata Naval of what happened. Then we get to 1994 political breakthrough. Now, when we get to the 1994 political breakthrough, a sad story happened because we got in charge of a political power, which was not complemented by economic power. But the truth is, he who has the purse has the say. So, over years from 1994 until now, the greatest struggle has been how do we then relocate the purse from the minority to the hands of the public or to the general hand. Now that's what has been a problem.
Is that the only problem though? Because you take us back to the moment of the Freedom Charter. Fast forward 2023. Clip down. Where it's supposedly supposed to be the monument, where people go to and read about it and know exactly what is written there, what it means to them. They're living in squalor. Right next to the monument. So is it just a problem of trying to get to the purse? Or is it a problem of going back to 1955 and saying, what were we saying?
Now,
Do we know what were we saying?
Now, exactly the point. Now, what then happened is that post-1994, as you are struggling, one, with building a nation, that Tata Mangena will speak about, that first we had to build a new nation, a rainbow nation. As you are doing that, you also had to grapple with the disparities that were there, that highest level of underdevelopment, poverty, and so forth. But over and above that, as you are dealing with that, you had to deal with the wealth redistribution. And this was not going to be without a fight. But as you do that, the struggle itself then gets infiltrated by these ones who feels that the quicker they get in, the richer they become. And the greed crops in.
The ones that your former late President Nelson Mandela spoke about in Cape Town.
The ones that President Beg would have spoken about, that something, that thing whispers to them that
Mandela spoke about a certain kind of cadre that is infiltrating. Are those the ones?
yes.
Okay.
Now, these ones that something quickly gets to, whispers to them continuously, as President Beg would have said, get rich quick to their head. Now, you are dealing with that. As you are dealing with the reality of dealing with redistribution, at the same time you are having to manage this new crop that has come in to quickly grab and go. That's the reason why, Bongi, when the ruling party went to its conference in 2017, it had to say, now we must put a pause. We must go through a renewal path. And because if we are to renew the leadership of the nation, you will then renew the society.
Is it renewing or cleansing? Because, and I ask you this before I move to Dr. Mangena and Prof. Fikeni, is that I ask you this because there's some who are talking about renewal and they are saying renewal looks like cleansing. So is it renewal or is it cleansing?
Well, in the process of renewal, in this particular process, the death will take it out. The death will cleanse it out just like an ocean.
All right.
The death will take it out of the system. Because one thing that process assisted the ruling party was that it then starts to raise the bar. Because the problem is that the common denominator in the ruling party and in the society, the denominator was a bad slate. Now you then have to elevate the bar to the extent that those within the ranks who may not fit into the bar will then walk away. And we have seen people starting to walk away from the ruling party because they can't meet the standards that we are starting to set. But of course, it is not going to be easy. There will be internal strife, but at the end of the day, if renewal wins, you start to put a leadership that is above reproach, then that will inspire society. Because at the current level, you can't differentiate, as all of us are agreeing, that first that the denominator is bad across the board, whether it's in church, whether it's in the education sector, whether it's even in a family system. Now, for you to resolve that, at least at the level of leadership, you must have people that when you look up to, you can say, at least I can follow Donald. At least I can rely on Donald on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unless you reach that, then the society will remain where it is.
I'm going to come back there. Dr. Prof. again. I'm going to look away as I ask this question. Has the bar been raised?
I think the wish for the bar to be raised has occurred, but the reality is that those who want to reach the bar have created conditions which have made it impossible for them to rise into that. I'll tell you why. There was a time when being a political leader was a calling, and you wanted to deliver your people and leave a legacy. Now it has evolved to a career choice, where the greatest vision for some, never mind the articulation, is, will I get nominated in the next list? Now, people who have not made it in business, people who have not made it in the professional world, where do they go for the quickest social mobility politics? Because the bar has not been made to be so low, the threshold. It is now buried under the ground. You have to dig to go underneath. That is where the problem is. In some communities, not all, A person who has been terrorizing the community, insulting people, crude, rude, mobilize, block the roads, ban the tires, and so forth, is often branded as a tried and tested cater who is now ready to get into the list. The very opposite of what you aspire to be as a leader. So that's why I do think that not only the ruling party, I'm on record in saying we have a problem of a political class. See, now those who are asking, we want to have individual candidates. It's more like trying to multiply the problem as it is into smaller fractions.
They're saying they're coming to sort it out because in a collective it's difficult.
But
You don't agree?
those people are disgruntled, some of them. Some may have the vision. So they ran away. They still have the genetic code of the parent they ran from.
So they basically have the cells and they are going to multiply in your view. Hey, yeah. So I suppose you are supporting the 15% threshold. You're saying maybe it must go higher.
Well, the thing is, whether you make the problem to look smaller or bigger, look at the coalitions and ask yourself if you get inspired. Debate around Tshwane and Johannesburg, it had literally degenerated into saying, if you don't put me or my person, there was no talk of how do we create a smart city or anything. They just, even here in this province, going to the 2017 conference, if this late I'm in or out, then it's not working if the permutation doesn't have me in. Why? It's because there is no deep conviction that drives people to say whoever makes it, if it is right, let it work. So it is that honesty deficit that you talked about when you were doing the opening remarks. If we have that honesty deficit, and we have sometimes a common sense deficit, we complicate things in this country, then we will begin to say we've diagnosed the problem, then we move on to the solution.
But we diagnose, and sometimes we diagnose to a task team or a commission. The commission has a report, and the report must be made. Recommendations must then be made, and then they must be tabled and sent back to Parliament, and then Parliament must then decide and debate in the National Assembly whether the recommendations must be adopted. And then if the recommendations are not adopted, they are sent back to the committee, and then the committee is again. Do you see what we're doing? Do you see what we are doing? So how do we begin to fix it then? If we are all still, our heads are spinning just from the process alone.
That's precisely the point when I say common sense deficit. This country often come up with complexity in order to avoid common sense. It's the same thing as this thing of a hijacked building. How possible or PRASA having ghost employees? You know that even if it was your uncle in the village, they would say, do you have ghost? Next month, everybody come and report. The one who doesn't show up, we stop the salary. But in South Africa, or textbooks in the Eastern Cape and here, on earth, how can a country debate 6 months on how to deliver textbooks?
I'm still waiting to be told about the bank accounts of the ghost employees, because I'm sure that system would have told us who's getting the money. But anyway, Dr. Mangen, do we have a nation to speak of?
No. And there is no vision. You know, I mean, the Afrikaners believed in something. And that something was folk and how to progress it, how to look after it, and so on. Similarly with the Chinese. So they have visions of, or a vision of where they ought to be. I don't think that those of us in this hall are dumb. But we don't know where South Africa ought to. We don't have a common vision of where South Africa must be next year, 5 years' time, 10 years' time. There is no vision.
And the Bible says where there is no vision, what happens?
Yeah, when you don't have a vision, you are just a mass of people who just move around. Everyone do whatever they can do to help themselves. So there is no common vision of where we want our country to be next year. And if I asked her, she doesn't, maybe she will tell me something where she would like. I ask him, he will give a different answer. You will give a different answer. He will give a different answer. So where are we going as a country? We ought to have a vision and have leadership that says, this is where we are going.
Who must provide that vision?
It is a political leadership that must give that vision, sell it to the nation. And it need not be party political. You know, when Petronas bought Engine, they were taking senior managers and taking them to Malaysia for training. And one of them was telling me how surprising it was that the taxi driver that take you from the airport to your hotel and so forth knew what Malaysia Vision 2020 is. That is where we want to be in 2020. That's what Malaysian people want. A taxi person knew that. But if you ask me and you ask the president, where do we want to be next year? Probably the president doesn't know. And there's 10 years' time where we are going to be. Because there is, but if the president knows, we should be knowing about it. Because we are the only people that will be working with him to actualize that vision. So if the president knows the vision and it is only with him, then we don't know where we are going as a people. So this guy says, this senior manager, says that these people in Malaysia, in Petronas, were not clock watching. They've got the vision in their heart and in their heads. They are not clock watching. Come 5 o'clock, they continue to work. 7 o'clock, they say, let's go for dinner. They go back to the office. And they continue to work. And he asked them, why are you working so hard? At the beginning, they couldn't understand what the hell he was talking about. And when they understood, they said, no, you see, we are working for a better Malaysia.
And so, hey, Honorable Ngakuswela, yes. Hey, Ngakuswela, ngiyabuya. Because I can't not come back to you after what Dr. Mangena is saying. I mean, and Dr. Figen, I'm coming back to you as well because gune system imajayo etim chomi kinakomang ko hatwa ne rati ngalanching. And that's that. It doesn't matter how many people are here waiting to be served by you. And you know, it's like, what? And come 1 o'clock, that office resembles a ghost town. 2 p.m. on the dot, everybody's back. And then the system is offline. And then the people must wait. And nobody thinks about the amount of money that they took, some of them, to get to that office. I'm coming back to that in just a moment. But I want us to talk about this vision. That how then do we begin to have a conversation that says, here are the ethics, they must look like this, the values we are being told right now. What is the ethos of South Africa? Do we even know as we are being told we don't know? I can't answer, I'm the one asking questions. If all of these are up in the air, and you know you deal with young people, they ask you the questions. They ask you where to from here. I wonder, what do you tell them? Honorable member. What do you tell the young people?
Look, Bongi, the problem is not whether we have a vision or not. Because Dr. Mangena will remember also that at a particular time, having had an opportunity to serve in the apex body of the country, the cabinet agreed on what must be the future of South Africa in terms of the National Development Plan and the vision there, 2030. Now, what then becomes a problem is how do you then rally everyone and unite everyone toward this particular vision? And I think that's where the challenge has always been. So
But is it about rallying or is it about knowing how to get there? Because right now we've been told over the last couple of years that we are not going to meet what we've set out in this blueprint because we've simply not taken the path towards Vision 2030.
It is as simple as this, Osbongi, that as a family, as a leader of a family, you would agree that by 2025 we want to build a 3-bedroom house. But even when you are not meeting that particular target, united as a family, you'll then be able to then shift the goalpost to say, at least we can be able to achieve this at this particular point. But the vision is identifying and crafting a vision and a blueprint of where we want to go has never been a problem, in at least even from that particular fateful day of 1955. The problem has always been, how do you then have everyone agreeing and united as a people behind this particular vision, where you don't have someone pulling the other side, the other ones pulling the other side. Now, what has been this particular problem on not everyone coming on board? It is the question that I spoke of earlier on of the redistribution of wealth become at the center of dividing this particular supposed to be a nation. Because we seem not to be all agreeing on what becomes our economic path for emancipation of everyone. That's what is the problem that we're facing as a country, as a nation, and as a people.
Interesting, because one would then ask if people still feel like they're part of that vision, but I'm going to come back to that. Please raise your hand so that I can spot you and see where to go. Prof, we talk about this and we're saying, yeah, all of this needs to happen and that, but we're still contending with the very basic of what I explained, that if we still do not have a work ethic like Dr. Mangena was describing, one that says this is where we are building towards, and you still have public servants who uzohlafuna ichairpiece kuze kube buhlungu ikhanda lakho wena ungayihlafuni, and two akhulume nawe ngendlela that is so demeaning, and yet you're supposed to be accessing this particular service, then what are we doing?
Well, I do think that we should rally around the current reforms of professionalization of the public sector. It is probably one of the first steps, because the experience of an average citizen is not the leader, is not parliament, it's a frontline worker who has to renew your license, where you pay your bill. If we invest on that and put our weight behind, we may get better results faster than hoping for the political culture to settle down.
Will the unions allow you to do that though?
I met with the leaders of the public sector unions last week, both Nahawe and PSA. We should understand that out of the public service, there are people who wake up, they want to do something right. Even when we say police are this or that you have more than 100,000 people arrested every year means somebody's doing something. At SARS, somebody's collecting. But the problem are some of them are within the institution. For example, they say, when I said, let's talk productivity, let's talk about this culture, let's talk about people doing memorial service during working hours. They conceded, but they said, make the conditions of work also possible for us. When I was talking about Batupil, they said, here is a clinic. In its establishment, it's supposed to have 10 nurses, but only 2 are there. And this one nurse has been standing since 7 a.m. Now it's 6 p.m. And when you walk in, you expect that person to have a smile. They have not had time to eat, or they've been requesting for the incubators for, premature babies for 5 years without being responded to. Now one day, you have these babies born, and they are more than these incubators. They look for a cardboard and put a blanket. They are lambasted. And they say, we leave home not planning to put babies on a cardboard. We're just trying to deal with it. So there are many factors which are there, which we ought to also address in this ecosystem besides the training and choosing the right people. But I want to end on this note. I wonder if South Africa's inequality is not one of the most unethical things to ever happen.
Sure.
Wherein people cannot exercise even the democracy that you see in the Constitution because of their position within society. Let me give you an example. If my PA earns so little compared to me, and he or she knows that she has to print tickets for my travel, they see the allowance, they see that as soon as I land, I go to Japan. When I come from Japan, I go elsewhere, and they look at my SNT being more than their salary. And I still want that person to be loyal. Those are some of the fundamental truths that we must begin to reflect on. That person has gone to Machonisa just to get money for transport to come and do your job. And they know that I'm not even making any contribution in those international conferences. If anything, I invite myself through Google to those conferences because I want to be permanently airborne. So those are some of the truths that we should begin to reflect on, even as we pontificate to some of these ordinary people.
And Sis-Pat, that very conversation also rages in the newsrooms about being paid well in the newsroom.
Who's being paid well?
I'm asking, when conversations happen about us not being paid well. I'm just saying that it's not a... Journalists are talking. Answer, please. I'm asking you very nicely, and I'm walking away to look for a mic so you don't shout. But I'm just saying.
It's a common thing. It doesn't matter where you go. Globally, there's this sense that journalism is a violent and unrewarding profession. That's how it's known globally. If you want to make money, go elsewhere, not in journalism. And that's how it works. But just one thing that, and I like the fact that Prof. Safikeni makes a point about the issue of inequality.
Yes.
It being an ethics issue. There's an observation. If there's one thing that has revealed the soul of this country, is load shedding. Load shedding. Those who have been, or who travel, or who stay in Johannesburg at different times, just observe what happens in traffic intersections during load shedding. If you think that there's still smooth flow of traffic, look who's there. homeless people and unemployed people directing traffic. People who are driving high-end cars, people who are in position of authority, respected people, police, traffic police, having traffic managed by homeless people in traffic intersections. And we all cruise, and no one is asking a question. And every time I see them, I ask myself, do we see them when the traffic flows smoothly? Do we see them? Or you're going to go to work and say, oh, load shedding didn't affect me, I just don't know how I got here, but there was load shedding. Somehow, traffic was flowing. But do we see these people? Yeah. Do we see them? So load shedding has been one of the most revealing things about the soul of this country. But to the point you were making about unequal pay and the other parts that you've referred to before about the role of the media, broadly and within the journalism space. One of the things that we have started doing, and I like what you were saying, Professor Figen, about the drive towards professionalizing the public sector, and it's something that we're dealing with within the journalism space. In November, SANEF, the National Editors Forum, is going to be launching an annual symposium about the state of the media. And it's a conversation that we are going to have every year, and it's an open platform for the public, civil society, to come and say, this is how your work is impacting us, negatively and positively. Academics must talk to the trends, the global trends on what's happening within the journalism space, but we are seeking to do exactly the same thing that Professor Fiken is talking about, professionalizing the sector. But in the process of doing that, now we are looking at the ways of trying to fix the problem. Journalism has always been about accountability, transparency, and advancing society. But how do we advance that society? Because if you look at the Bill of Rights, how many times do we have conversations that make reference to the Bill of Rights in the country? How many times? Do we only remember it on the 31st of March? Hey. And if you look at how journalism is practiced, and it's something that we always encourage in the newsrooms, that if you're going to tell a story about pit latrines in schools or anything that has to do with social development, go to the NDP, reference the NDP, because you'll raise the level of consciousness in your reportage. But it doesn't happen because we are all in the race for ratings.
Yeah.
We're chasing headlines. We don't get to that level. And if we are going to have impact in the new order, we basically have to move beyond what we've been doing as in raising levels of transparency and accountability. We need to look at promoting the observance of human rights in the country. We need to look at advancing human dignity issues in the country and issues of social justice. Otherwise, our journalism becomes irrelevant.
And especially because, you know, sometimes we even have conversations about things we have not even picked up a document to read. Yeah. You're going to talk about somebody's policies, but you don't even know the policy position. Yeah. And how do you begin then to inform society about that? But as I take the question, I'm going to come back after we take this question, because there's another layer that the media is contending with. Everyone with a cell phone now is posting things and violating, and they're calling themselves journalists. And there are so many ethics that they are violating there. And it's also creating problems in our space. That I think you had a question.
Yes, Auspongi, thanks very much. I think, let me dilute the panel a bit. You've been talking and you're going too deep. But in your deepness, I want to ask a question, and I think it's going to be important that you honestly answer it so that it lays a critical foundation on how we're taking the evening forward. There's an appreciation about power and who is in charge. At the same time, we appreciate ethical leadership has been on a downward spiral with time, right? Prof. Mangiana says, we are not in charge. And ask them, they know who is in charge. Salamalala says, those that are in charge have a say. I argue, they don't have a say, they have a voice, and they dictate the path, right? Is it in the interest of those that have all what it takes to dictate the path, to have ethics being the center of reality in the society, in the public service, in our body politic? If we are accepting that there are those that are in charge and we are not in charge, let's talk about the two. What's the correlation between? Is it by coincidence that you are living in a highly unequal society? Is it not by design? Who is in charge of the design? Our political leadership over time, the downward spiral that you are talking about, you know when we grew, we had an understanding that in politics, you selflessly dedicate yourself to serve. Now it says that is not about you. Logically, you can't fight to be a slave of the people, right? But today people die for saving people. Is it possible? Who has designed that? I want to take it further just a bit and I'm out.
And before you are out,
Yeah.
please tell me who do you need to respond, no?
All of them. Let me touch on media.
I'm gonna need maybe just
Yeah,
one so that we can maybe move.
sure.
on. Yes,
And I'll pause after
yes,
this one.
Yes.
Issue of media and ethics. When we were in the COVID-19, all what at the end of the day was the talk of the day during COVID was corruption and expenditure, right? And media magnified what basically got regarded as black corruption in the country when it comes to government spending. And I will sit and ask myself, why will everyone, remember not everyone decide to live ethics at home, but why would there be a driven narrative that is consistent? And the narrative was this: corruption, black business. And I said, why are we all so quiet about this? Is it because those that are in charge continue to deepen black on black violence, even in this day? When at a time, government had spent 140 billion on procurement, only 14 billion was promulgated on the SIU request by the president. What happened to the 126 billion? It had no black. Was it clean? Couldn't media pick that up? Was it by design of those that are in charge of the system and the economy? And we hear ethics about media all the time. And there will always be an argument that we don't create content is there. But I'm saying, is it really there that we should pick up or you select based on those that are in charge of the system? So I'm saying, let's talk about dwindling of ethics vis-a-vis power dynamics and real power dynamics.
And that's such a powerful question, loaded. And Ndata Slamlo, you want to take it? Sis Pet, I'm going to ask you to take the media one.
There is a part obviously that is directed to politics.
Yes.
And I think I need to repeat this, that, and I agree with him, with Tavisho, that those who have the past dictate the path as it stands. But our struggle has always been about ensuring that the wealth of the country is redistributed equally to our people, so that these inequalities we are speaking about, the persistent inequalities, and I think Dr. Mangana puts it correctly that 90% of the population fights for just the public purse, which is actually funded mostly by taxes. So he is correct. And one thing that we have not asked ourselves as we are discussing ethics is to what extent are those who are dictating the path ensuring that we do not, one, become united as a nation behind the very vision? Who is making it difficult for South Africans, particularly the majority of South Africans, to be united behind Vision 2030 as encapsulated in the National Development Plan? Is it in the interest of those who are currently dictating the path, economic-wise, to have us united as a nation and achieving the set objective we have set for ourselves? Or me and Dr. Mangena agreeing that we are a nation and we are marching towards this 2030 vision, united as a people?
Interesting. And suspect, Dr. Mangena, yes, go ahead.
Is in the younger generation. Perhaps I could just add another aspect of this. You know, those of us who are from the older generation, across political parties, I see Comrade Nafalowodo here, and I think I saw some other people. We had a vision of what this country and this society would look like when we were together in the trenches, in police cells being tortured, in prison cells, in exile, and so on. When we meet now, one of the questions we ask ourselves frequently is, we ask one another is, how did we come to be, to find ourselves where we are now, in this mess? It's not what we envisaged. We were dreaming of a very beautiful country in which, especially the black majority, the African component of our population, which is nearly 90% of the population, that it is going to be proud of itself, lead dignified lives, and so on. Not what we are seeing now. But the big thing is that it seems as though even those of us who were in the trenches do not believe this thing that we have now. Do not really believe we have got it. I mean, why are we still singing songs about the Boers must bring our land back? Don't we have political power? Why are we begging them to give our land back? Why are we singing about shooting the Boer? Why do we shoot Muruti Okaima Kola kwa? Aropela di fela. They are urging us. What is the English? You wanted the good English.
Yes, I said no.
Agitating us, to go to heaven. So even the songs that we sang during the struggle, they were taking us somewhere, to liberation. So if we are still singing about asking the Boers to give our land back, and at the highest level, we stand on platforms and we sing that, what are we saying? Because if we are in power, we don't beg Boers to give our land back. We take it. So why are we going to shoot the Boers for?
Hey, okay, Dr. Prof. Figeni, I think you've got something just before I bring you in.
Well, I do think that a binary approach to this discussion may actually absolve certain people from agency. What you are saying is correct, but it doesn't end there. Now, I'll just pull up my, academic thing by saying, there is something called hegemonic power, where whites had now risen to a level of complete dominance, even of the psychology, the philosophy, the outlook, and everything, and wealth. And then what the liberation movement was trying to do was to wage a counter-hegemonic struggle. But we didn't fulfill that. What we're having now are dual problems. One is legacy. Colonialism and apartheid not touched in a serious way. Hence the discrepancies. The second one, those who were meant to lead that transformation weakened their moral authority by opting for assimilation to the existing rather than transforming the system. Now that is the dilemma that we have. Had people not aspired to assimilate, they would have a greater conviction and moral authority to transform. So the political power gives you agency. Other countries have started from a low base, they transformed. So we can't say there is some level of helplessness, but there was the weakening and the contamination of our moral authority to conduct the struggle once we got greedy. But now, come to the narrative that is pushed. I think you're correct. It's just that we've become more polite with years with English. There is still racism, even in the media. When Bobby Mutaung was involved in the Mbombela Stadium, he was in the front pages of Sowetan. When the construction companies, which were largely white, were involved in corruption, they didn't appear in front pages. They were always on page 17B. We didn't see their faces. Not even the logos of companies. I kept on searching. Why? It's because to some degree, the shareholders of the media, without even telling you, you have to self-censor. You see, there was this Bosasa leader who was funding everybody, corruption. Then there were Guptas and other black folks. When it's black and corrupt, they wait next to the school to check which school you are going to. They take photos of your car. But what have we done to the stain of person? Nothing. We have not checked where are they studying, what are they doing, because we assume that their whiteness ought to correspond with wealth. And your blackness, wealth should be mysteriously explained. But not only that, this thing of BRICS, West versus East and so forth, say, how dare Iran, human rights, how do you bring them in? But the US has been bringing in Saudi Arabia with human rights. So that nuance and depth is missing. Country like US has declared 80% of the wars. But all of a sudden we're being agitated to say, hey, you must all go mad. How can Russia do this? Sit, hey, into yabo masishie nabo. Let them not drag us into this thing. So that nuance lacks, but there is also political correctness. Let me give you a simple example, and it's a last and controversial one. The issue of migration, media doesn't want to touch that one. I often say we have grammar and diction to describe, as we should, phobia for foreigners. We have grammar and diction to describe and concepts phobia against Africans from the continent. Do we have any grammar to describe phobia against South Africans? Where this restaurant and that company says, we will employ everybody except South Africans. We don't. Which means we've abandoned the principle of fairness to say don't be phobic towards international, towards fellow African, and therefore towards South Africans. Had we done that, then we would say, how do we balance national interest and international obligations?
My job is just to ask questions. Suspect pendula. Pendula suspect. Pendula.
No. I'm going to respond. And I like the point that Professor Fikin is raising about nuance. Because in the question that has been asked about whether the fact that we're seeing more stories on black corruption, particularly around COVID, whether it's to do with power. There are two things. The first one is that it is true. That's the first one. It's true. So who has the power to tell what story without fear? Because there's also that part. So you have the power to tell the political story because you know that no one is going to come for you. And the other side has the power to tell the business story and its corruption because no one is going to come for them. Remember, there's public and private media in the country. So they have their own prisons on both sides. So it's going to reflect in the stories that they tell. But the second part is with the depletion of capacity in newsrooms, we tend to go for the convenient and the easy to cover. To the extent that what you're going to see in what you are seeing in the news media and the news cycle is what comes through press briefings. It's the drama, like what's happening in Johannesburg now, and it's reports that get published on a daily basis. There is no depth in what's being covered because there's no capacity to get to that level. So if the SIU is going to publish a report and says this is what is, or this is what we have investigated, that's exactly what's going to be covered. No one is going to ask, oh wait, what is it that you have not investigated? No one asks that question, which is where you start seeing the imbalances in the coverage. But there's another problem, and it's something that very few editors deal with in the newsrooms. The representation of black voices and black bodies and black faces in the media. No one questions why blacks are always the face of poverty, the face of crime, the face of social ills, and everything that's negative. You're going to see black faces on television. And how so? The face of disease. And no one is dealing with that in the newsrooms because everybody is rushing to get ratings. It doesn't matter at what cost to the country, because that is the problem that we're dealing with. So I agree with you with the stuff, but there's more, there are many dimensions to the problem. And in fact, one of the things that have happened with the news media, in fact, I want to go to the other side, the entertainment side, because this is also the space that never gets interrogated where ethics is concerned. Because no one questions the commissioning editors as to how do you get to the point where you think it's okay to glamorize crime in your content. Because our kids get to consume this content and there isn't even a debate at the end of the season of whatever series they were running to say, these are the things that came up. Let's have a conversation. How do we deal with these things? There's a lot of glamorization of crime and glorification of crime, and that crime pays. And this is what our kids grow up seeing. So across the two divides, in fact, that's a business model, because even the dirty rankings that we are chasing or the dirty ratings that come as a result of these stories are what sells, because we're going to go to advertisers. It's our currency. We have these many people who are watching, so please come and advertise with us.
And
That's how it
sometimes
works.
to even exploit the pain of people.
running a
Precisely.
whole show about somebody going through something, and it trends, and you know, those are some of the questions. But as I said,
just a minute.
I'm
There's-
just asking
yeah,
questions.
There's something that Professor Fiken raised, and it's profound. At what point do we get to tell the stories of the phobias that we're dealing with, particularly against our brothers from the continent? Because you never hear, we know all the different thugs that we have in the country that come from different parts of Europe and other parts of the world that populate different parts of the country. No one is asking questions about them because they are white. No one is asking any questions. They are okay. They are not labeled foreign nationals, but they are worse in terms of what we see in the country. Yeah. So, yeah, Ukriche and others. In fact, I remember at the time of that story, Bedford View, as the media, we called it Deadford View because that's where the killings were happening, because these are syndicates. So when as the media, we do not raise the issues of coexistence, when it's quiet, it becomes a problem, because you cannot deal with such issues when there's a problem with attacks against foreign nationals. It's late at that point.
And
So when it's quiet, this is when we should be having conversations.
sure, and you raised quite a bit that is being contended with, and I wonder if there's another question
Okay.
before we even continue.
Thank you very much and good evening. My challenge, I want to raise this challenge to all of us. I wish Pule Munama was here. I once challenged him when I heard there was a political lecture by at UNISA. And one of the speakers who was invited there was the advisor to the former President Thabo Mbeki. That lady, I forgot her name, but she's a Zapo. Mujangu Kompi. Yeah, and she spoke so well. And I said to Pule Monama that I wish that this woman was speaking at the assembly of the school. Because I have realized that most of us, when we talk in forums like this. And everything that we have said here deserves to be heard by learners at the school or students at the university. Because we're talking about ethics. And we are ethical. All of us in here are ethical, I should assume. But the people who we want to make sure that are ethical are in the universities and in the schools. But do we go there? No, we don't go. We talk amongst ourselves. We are the converted. Whether we are Christians or whoever we are, I don't know. So I want to challenge all of you here that you come from schools. All of you come from high schools or the primary school. Adopt a school and go there and say whatever you are saying there, Dr. Mafikeni and everybody, Dr. Mangena, go to your school. Salamulela, I know that you go to Marovatut. Go to our schools. Let's say these things that we are saying here in our schools so that we stop complaining about our learners not being ethical and all these things. So I'm challenging you that next time when we come here, they must tell us that they've been to their schools and they've said these things to their learners so that we don't talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
We'll not solve the problem.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Papa. And that is the truth, because ultimately there's no point in speaking to each other. The message needs to get there. Ntate Moruti, ho na le letsone ka mo morago just behind you. No, you can go ahead. I was just notifying you because he's just been trying to get my attention as well. You can go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much and good evening to everybody. My question is towards Prof, Dr. and Mr. Slamulela, Honorable. It's more political than anything because we have created assumption in society, more particularly leaders of the ruling party. And I form part of that ruling party. Look, when we began the session, Bongi, you gave us very profound profiles about our people, our panelists. And then we lack that in political platforms. You know, when we go to a political sitting, when we introduce a leader, we don't speak those profiles. We say the comrade is from exile, the comrade fought heavy battles, the comrade, hey, comrades. The fact of the matter is, Prof was saying, what kind of leaders do we need in society? Because now we have a person in a community who bends tires, and that person is presumed to be a leader that is to represent the society. Now I go back to the ruling party. We are creating a public assumption to the society that this comrade that is from exile, that fought, that, you know, sometimes when we say exile, they don't relate to education. They don't relate to anything or any status of dignity. They think it's burning, it's fighting, it's the same things that create attraction to these people that are fighting in communities. And yet we receive them as community leaders. Hence, that's why we have a problem in society where now it's the least conference, whatever it is that we call it. We want to front those leaders that are burning tires. Because the public assumption is that those that fought 1976, they burned, everybody thinks that for you to be a leader, you must have burned something. So that is where we are today. And I think it's time that leaders in society take responsibility. Because we speak in public forums, in political organizational forums. When we introduce leaders, we address them as activists that fought. So we are creating an assumption that is creating a problem for us in society, that you must fight. We are not saying this cadre, prof, PhD, prof, masters, prof, a community builder, assists homeless children, assists this, we say fight, and then a parliament cadre deployment.
So basically, as a cadre, if I'm understanding you correctly, who understands the struggle of the day and not the struggle that they used to go through. And they understand what this youth is faced with. Honorable Member?
No, thanks, and thanks for the input, Mary Jane. You would agree with me that, and I would have said, from 2017, the ruling party has been at pain to try to change certain trends, including about how we deploy leaders. One, you would remember that when we went to the local government elections, we then, beyond the ANC membership dictating who must be a councillor, introduce another leg now to then say the community must also have a say. Because of the fear of what would you have said, Prof, that one of the challenges that we have is that even within the organization, then we'll have a faction capturing the process and producing an illegitimate leader. But then we introduce the aspect of the society so that in a jurisdiction where you want Mary Jane or Donald to lead, he must pass the public scrutiny. But then what becomes the problem is the very death of a society, in the sense that the very society will produce a criminal and support a criminal. At some stage, a candidate that were put forward by the ANC in line with that particular program becomes a victim of criminals who come to this meeting, mobilized the very community that we put this system to defend, to produce a criminal and becomes a candidate. I'm just saying, the problem is too intrinsic, but that's what we are dealing with as the ruling party, because every system that you come with, you must know that it will always be, for every advancing force, there will always be a counter force.
Sure,
Lastly, Bongi,
Okay.
is the issue relating to qualifications. You would know even now that the ruling party has said, albeit the fact that there are those who you can condone for not having qualifications, but the majority of a crop of young people who would have been born post-1994, who have no reason not to have qualification, will have to really show a cause why they must be on the list to lead, because the current type of society we want to lead is a society that needs leaders who are advanced academically, technological-wise, and so forth. So it is not like there is no work that is being done to try and redress these things, but we must know it will not be without a fight.
I suppose then, Mary Jane's fight is a different one, and it's interesting. We are rounding up our questions, and I'm going to ask that we keep them very brief, because as keeping with the ethics, we must make sure the workers go home in time, I'm told. So we must eat. So I think that that's one of the things that, as you say, it's interesting, the fight, what does it look like? But there's so many questions that continue to arise. And if you can just please keep your question very brief.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to find out concerning the media, is there a system in place that handles misinformation and disinformation towards the audience?
Sure.
Because I feel like if we don't deal with misinformation and disinformation, we saw it with COVID, we saw it with the number of issues the brother raised. How do you handle that? Secondly, concerning the media hold in SA, what has contributed to the loyalty she mentioned given to the audience through conviction or truth? Does the nation know truth? What is truth? Who regulates truth?
All right.
Is it cultural? Is it spiritual? What is truth?
Got you. Sis P?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with the last one because it's the easy one. Within the context of journalism, truth is what is verifiable as fact. It's simple as that. In fact, we even say journalism, it's more like your preschool kind of exercise. It's a show and tell. If you can't show it, it's not true and it's not there. So it's verifiable state of reality where journalism is concerned. And you hear, in fact, print usually gets away with it, and in fact, it works in their space. You wouldn't do this in broadcast. Because with print, you can easily quote anonymous sources. You can quote all sorts of things and reliable sources close to the issue. You don't do that in broadcast. You've got to say who said what. So, but as it stands, truth is about what can be verifiable as reality. And
that's why sometimes we get accused of not covering certain stories.
Yes.
Because we cannot find a body.
Yeah.
To say this.
Yeah, you've got to show it. In fact, I'm just tempted to say this. There is, so this is 2021 local government elections campaigns. An incident happens in the Free State, and the president is there. And there are health workers from the province. Remember, it was still it was still around the COVID time. And they were complaining about the working conditions, lack of all the things that they require to do their jobs. So at the point where the president is supposed to be dealing with the campaigning part of his visit there, the workers come to the front and they start saying things and wanting to be attended to because they use that opportunity. We report on this, and it's live on television. Get a call, but that's not true. How is it not true when it's there? And everybody can see it. So how do you change it and make it something else when it's visible and everybody can see what has gone? What has happened there? So this is the state of reality that we talk about. It doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes you. It happened, it's there. And the other part of the question, I think that was the first part, misinformation. Newsrooms, this is what distinguishes social media chancers from branded news content, which is the media houses. We always advise people to go with branded content because these are people who account to different authorities. Your broadcasters account to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission because that's where your audiences go and complain for either misrepresentation, unfair coverage and all that. And your print has a self-regulatory mechanism being the Press Council of South Africa. It has a press code, it regulates all stuff on digital and hard copy print. And then you have ICASA that deals with all the coverage around elections and all the stuff, which is where your licenses of, for radio stations and television come from, and they are regulated in what they do. So where misinformation and disinformation is concerned, newsrooms verify information before they publish. And this is what you see. When there's a breaking news story and it's on social media and people would be saying, oh, but already it's on social media, why are these media houses not running it? They want to hide it. No, we are still verifying it because we can't publish unverified facts. So this is what distinguishes what you see on social media and what you see on your brand and new
In
branded
30
news
seconds,
houses.
because I'm rounding up everything now, the issue of bias
What
was
that?
raised.
Yeah.
The issue of bias. Udatu Fikeni says we are not dealing with it. The issue of
different-
bias in
yeah.
the media in terms of, one, there's a whole lot that he's raised.
Okay.
And it almost seems as if there's a slant that's being taken in terms of the sides we choose, who we choose, what do we say. Utabiso called it black corruption, this and
okay.
that.
I thought in fact, I made reference to it, but I picked on the xenophobia
Yes.
and all the sorts of phobias that we get to respond, we get to report on. I don't think that we choose sides. You can say that in other spaces where you have your politics, because politics is always fluid. And in fact, one of the problems that we have is journalists bringing their political interests to our newsrooms. Yeah. And when you say to them, we know that you have associations, you are a member of society and you would have these associations, but can you be a journalist for once? Because you are tainting every single journalist that is part of this newsroom. So you can't dispute that. It happens in newsrooms, and you can even tell when people tell their stories that I can pick this up, and there's a tinge of politics and association in the way the story is told, and it requires vigilance from the side of editors.
And
but
even
in other spaces, it is true that some of the times stories are picked, and here's one thing that we miss. You have media houses that are commercially driven. And you have media houses that are part of conglomerates. And you can tell which stories get told in depth, and you can tell which stories that get glossed over. I actually remember one of the instances has been the employment equity report. And it's one, I always pick on that because it's always been my bugbear. There are media houses that gloss over the employment equity report. And it's because of the interest of the owners. And there are media houses that are going to go deep into the employment equity report because they have no interest, but there's something else they are going to pick on. They know that it's a no-go for the media house because that media house has interest in this space. You can even look at how the impacts of gambling are on society are reported by the different media houses. Go and look who has interest in what sector and see how that's reported on.
And
so there are many layers to that.
So I'm getting up because we need to wrap. I'm going to, I don't know if Muruti, we have, Papa has had his hand up, 10 seconds.
Thank you. Somebody raised the issue of genetic problem. This country is in a mess. we have so many political parties. And most of them are the ones that are already genetically contaminated. Now, I want to ask this question, maybe Ndate Honorable. We are going to 1994. Do we need political party system to vote for? Or
Right.
we must just bury everything?
Especially because you did, they do say next year is
Yeah.
a semblance of where we were.
Because for the past almost 30 years, we have excuses up to today.
All right.
So, Ntate Mangena, do we really need political party system in this country when we are in this mess? Who will, out of these political parties, who will save us? Because
Okay.
we can only say, as he talks about deployment, we can only say if we have a card. If we don't have that, we are out.
All right. Honorable, 10 seconds.
Thanks very much. Look, I don't think we must see having many political parties as a problem. I think we must see it as the extent to which our democracy has matured. Remember what we fought for was the right to vote and to be voted. That's what Buntate Mangen and Tate Nefolo vote, Buntate Chava, and all of everyone would have fought for. The question is, which is a common denominator that we must ask, as a nation and as people, are we able to separate and see chances versus those who represent
Yeah.
reality? That's what matters. We are able to see, as you would say, that other individuals are in it to settle certain scores, but you still have certain segment of the society voting for such individuals. But to the extent that we have everyone standing and say, I can serve the nation better, it shows democracy has matured. We are not gagging anyone to stand. But the fact is, the nation must arrive at a determination that says, able to differentiate between wrong and right. That's my conclusion.
I'm out of time. As you can see, Ntate Moruti is actually getting up. And I'm going to just say to each of you 5 seconds each as we wrap up your parting shot. 5 seconds, literally 5 seconds. Your parting shots, 5 seconds. We're saying goodbye.
Just to say that a very informative session we had. We all have a joint responsibility to build the South Africa we want.
Thank you.
And working together, we can do more.
Dr. Mangena?
The mess in which we are can only be solved by us as a society. And the day we stand up and say we would like society that is ethical, that does the right thing, where there is order, where there is governance, then that's the day on which our society will cleanse itself of the problems it finds itself in, and will get out of the morass in which we find ourselves.
Thank you. I'm already bestowing you the honor. Dr. P?
Fading ethicality is a problem across the board, as you had seen in this conversation. But where the media is concerned, with all the mistakes that we acknowledge as the media, we should also bear in mind that for any democracy to function, you need a free flow of information. So censoring certain media houses is not going to work, particularly those that are believed to be close to politicians. And the last part is that if we then get to censor the information, there are sectors of the population that have no access to the information that they need. And what we know is that democracy dies in the dark.
Prof?
A national dialogue that will create consensus around what society we want in a social compact. Number 2, do everything but reviving the dying African family as a base and reviving an education system as a base to sustain is key. And the last one, our national discourse, especially about our constitution and constitutional order, should not only be about rights, but responsibilities. Thank you.
That wraps up my job. Thank you very much. Siyabonga.
Thank you very much. Again. You are a star. Yeah. Yeah. Let's do this. Before we listen to the closing music, there are a few announcements to make. Let's be together. Because remember we started 1 hour late, so the hotel has got a way in which they run their courses. Before Dr. Martin Slapelo would be doing our vote of thanks, I just got one announcement to make from the foundation. A story first. I was traveling from Nairobi, coming to South Africa. It was on a Friday night. And this guy who was seated next to me was a white guy, and he got drunk because, you know, they fill up that flight from Nairobi midnight. Now this guy says to me, and I want all of you to take this story seriously, it's a true story. He says to me, if we knew when you said you were looking for or fighting for liberation, we could have given it to you quite easily, quickly. Because you are not very difficult people. All you need is just to have a nice car, a nice home, take your children to a white school, and that's all you needed. You're not difficult, you're not complicated. But we were afraid, we didn't know that these are things that you could easily get day after tomorrow, and life will go on. And indeed life is going on. Because we're taking our children to be taught by them. And I'm not being racist. All I'm saying is we need to start doing things ourselves. Because this is how these guys see us. Then he says something, Martin. He says, you know, the tradition of sandwich and tea after church was because we, white people, don't meet often. We are too private. We don't like masses. But in church, we know, at least once a week, we are going to see each other. And then we develop socialized tea and sandwiches. But what we talk when we drink tea, he says to me, we talk about you. And how to handle you. Because we know come Monday, the nannies are coming back, the garden men are coming back, the farm workers are coming back, and there is a way in which we must end up that week managing black people. So we go back to church on Sunday and then have another tea, talk about you. But then lastly he says something quite telling. He says, but you guys have got enough time. You meet weekly at a funeral and we count you. You are just too many. What do you talk when you are at a funeral? Why can't you use, then he says to me, why can't you use a funeral space to develop yourselves? Because that is the space we are too jealous about because we don't have it. Now we imagine we white people, if we had a funeral and 2,000 of us meet, we would change things around. But we only have church. But you have a funeral. Every week. Guaranteed. So we have got opportunities, but we don't see them. We go to a funeral to booze after tears. We go to a funeral to show off our suits after funeral. We go to We go to funeral to show off our cars. That's what we're doing with a funeral. But they say, no, we can't use funeral to do that. We will talk about you. So that was one thing, just aside to say. Ntswaki Chere. Ntswaki, can you come forward? It's a young person. It's a young girl. Ntswaki comes to me at the foundation. He comes to the foundation. And he says, Murut, I'm studying aviation. I'm studying how to drive this thing, a pilot, an aircraft. And she says to me, you can pull off the coat so they see your epaulets, man. The pilot epaulets must inspire us. Now, Ntswaki says to me, I have passed what is called a private pilot license. She has a license to drive a private pilot. Now, she says, what I want to drive is that Boeing. That's 737, 747. I want to drive that thing. But for me to do that, I must go to school. I must go back to class. I'm just going to read for you how she passed her marks in a private pilot. The air law, she got 93%. Then there is something called restricted radio. She gets 78%. Then she studies what is called principles of flight, and she gets 92%. She goes and studies what is called aircraft general. She would know what that means, and she gets 85%. Human performance and limitation, she gets 77%. Then she goes to meteorology. She gets 79%. And she goes to what is called flight performance and planning. There she gets 90%. And the last one is general navigation. And there she gets 93%. This is distinction. This is what we call distinction. Now, she wants to go to school, and I want to make a clarion call that at the foundation, we are asking you to come and help Ntswaki to drive a 747. The other day I was in Solomon Dale and I said, I wanted a pilot who could come, a helicopter, who could come and motivate somebody who drives a helicopter. And I was told that in the whole of Limpopo, there is only one. Her name is Tebo. She's a girl. She drives for SAPS, South African Police Service. And they say without Tebo, that South African Police Service helicopter in Limpopo can't go anywhere. It can't go anywhere. So I'm saying to you, those of you who have got networks, where is Donald? Honorable. Those of you who have got an interest in changing this country around, this is a pilot in the making. She's already having a pilot license. All she needs is to improve her studies. Like you after your junior degree, you went for masters and stuff. She wants to drive that big one. I know that each time we go, those of you who fly a lot, you know, each time we go there and we watch who is flying us, it's never a Ntswaki. There are very few. And to turn this country around, it's in our hands. And we need to do that. So I'm inviting anyone, all of you, to come and make a contribution. We will show you these results. We will show you how much she owes at the school, and we will then take her up. She must become a project of us, all of us. Thank you, Ntswaki. Yeah, thank you. I'm inviting you. Now, lastly, before Dr. Martin comes forward, lastly, Yeah, we rarely shake the hand of a pilot. Yeah. So I'm saying before Dr. Martin Slapelo comes forward just to pronounce vote of thanks, the foundation, as you all know, it's a non-profit organization. So we rely on you. When we say, let us come and meet and eat and talk and see these beautiful people who are coming across our country, we're doing it because we know we can bank on you to come and enjoy with us. Now, in particular, we got sponsors, some of the sponsors for this event tonight. And it is not a bad idea to acknowledge some of them. Some of them said they do not want to be acknowledged, and they are amongst you. There are those that have not asked whether they want to be acknowledged or not, so I'll make my own, what do we call it, discretion. And the Safara Ramusi family have come on board to assist us run this thing tonight. And let's give them a round of applause. They are here. The wife is here. I don't see Mr. Safara, but I see the wife is here. Mary, you want to just wave to the audience? Yeah. Then we have got Tabiso Lukwana and his wife. They are running a company called Bikacon. Tabiso started with the foundation. The foundation started in 2015. And Tabiso has always been with the foundation ever since that time. Now it's about how many years? Martin? And there are many of you here who have been with the foundation for a long time. The teachers there, those schools from Mankweng, you are sponsoring us, you just not be aware. Mogodumo Circuit over there, sponsoring us without knowing, because we are seeing your results. They have all improved. Is that not so, Mastula? They have all improved because we are doing work with you and we have done work with you. And you are part of our sponsors. We know you started with us from many, many years ago. And many others, individuals who are in this room. I see Butsa Manyatel. I know tonight we have said things that are very passionate too, with Chaba over there. And I'm saying, Martin, come forward and say thank you to all of them, including our sponsors, including our beneficiaries, including the churches here tonight. This is not the church that tells people wrong things. This is the right church.
Thanks. I don't know. Thank you very much, Maruti, and thanks everybody. I always like giving the vote of thanks because I know that nobody will come and countermand my comments. But anyway, and I also am appreciative of the fact that it is quite a challenge in terms of time. But I also think that there is quite, as I provide the vote of thanks, just make some few comments as well. And I would like to start by saying that it became apparent to me that due to the complexity of problems that face humanity today, those who do not know should not lead. Now, these are not my words. These are the words of a professor that you all know from Limpopo. I forgot. I didn't forget. Just checking. It's Professor Chilidzi Marwala. That's his words. And I think it's important, and it's one of the things that probably came up in the discussion today. And one of the things that I asked myself as we were listening is when the foundation then said, we need to have a discussion, a conversation on instilling the culture of ethics in our nationhood. did we actually succeed? Because part of the discussion ended up with doubting the existence of the nation itself. And the question then says, if we doubt the existence of the nation, then did our conversation succeed? You be the judge. But from my point of view, I think it did. Because what it then means is that it starts to make us think. And sometimes when we talk about ethics, the question is, what is it? And from my point of view, it is doing the right things right. And the question is, and it always will be, what is right and what is the right way of doing things? Dr. Mangena says, "Leadziwa." The risks that are inherent in doing the right things and the challenges of making the right decisions. And people always do what they think is best for them. And therefore, what is best for them creates a challenge for doing the right things. But I always also sometimes talk about this, and I will repeat it again. There's a professor called Sohail Inayatullah. He's from Pakistan. He operates from Australia. He has some idea that he calls causal layout analysis. And it's about saying, how do you want to understand the world so that you can change it for the better? And his view, he says, in order for you to understand the world, there are people who look at what he calls the litany, what some other people, to explain it simply, what are the everyday problems, where you mentioned, yes, there's a fire here, there's a fire there, there's a fire there. That's fine, but does it help you to solve the problems? And then other people will then say, yes, we need to understand the causes of those fires. And therefore, once you understand the causes, you might be able to deal with them. But he then says it's not enough, because even if you understand the causes and the systems that make those fires and so on, you actually need to understand the world views that support those systems, which is the type of things when, if, for example, you were to talk about black consciousness itself, it's part and parcel of the world views that people have that deals with that. But Sohail says it's not even enough, because behind that, below that, is what he then refers to the metaphors and the myths. These are the stories. And this is where the conversation that we're having today is trying to deal with. What are the metaphors? What are the myths? What are the stories we tell each other? What are the stories that we tell our children? And I was excited when I forget your name, I had written it down, ma'am. I didn't want to use the what you call, when she talked about not only looking at the news media, but looking at entertainment and all those things. Because this is where the stories that we tell get transmitted, when we listen to those stories. Because when you actually look at it, the stories we tell ourselves sometimes is that somebody owes us something. And it takes the power out of our hands. It gives other people the power to determine our own futures. And I think the next thing I wanted, just to share a very small story that I've experienced this week, which deals with how we deal with different opinions and how people deal with it. And I'm linking this to the fact that we are having a conversation and so on, is that it's a WhatsApp story. I normally, those who know me, I probably look at WhatsApp once a week or something like that. But sometimes when I read some of the stories, I just follow up one story. There's this story about the CFO, the acting CFO in the Department of Defense. And people were saying, yes, this person is a foreign national, right? But when you look at this person, he has been a South African citizen for the last 15 years or more, and so on. And the question is, what does it mean? So there's this discussion about this CFO, and then people then say, but what does the Constitution of South Africa say, and what do we mean? And the Constitution of South Africa says we have equal citizenship. And what does it mean? Equal citizenship means, in my books, that if you are a citizen and I'm a citizen, there shouldn't be a difference. But our society looks at it differently and says, but you then have to then, over and above that, infuse the politics of saying, what is South Africa? What is any other country? Who made it? Are we the ones who made it? Is it somebody else who then came and told us, this is South Africa, the other people are not part of you? I have a view. But in terms of that story, I could see the level of intolerance of different views. And hence, I just would like to say, those who have time, there's a very interesting book by a guy called Michael Sherman called Giving the Devil His Due. Now, in that book, the author says that you need to understand that in accepting the different views, you are actually protecting your right to be different. Because if you don't accept other people's views, why do you think other people must accept yours? And I could see at some point, we almost have a challenge in our discussion today around people who then had a different perspective around different people's views. And there's also a point that he mentions, which I would like to share with you in my closing remarks, is that if anyone expects their views to be accepted and supported without supporting them with facts, why it gives you the opportunity to actually oppose those views without even giving a reason. I would like to say we have quite a big challenge in South Africa when we even look at the type of financial challenges that we have. And what it means is that we need to change our society from getting handouts, and doing things for each other. And I think starting from what Murutu Siekui was saying as we started our discussion and our conversation on the right note, and I have already commented about a little bit of what the panelists have said, and I'm not going to repeat that. But I think I would like to take this opportunity to thank the panelists, thank everybody who participating by asking questions, by laughing, raising whatever voice, and listening. And that is part and parcel of our conversation. The band, we thank you, even if you're still going to do much more. I actually wish those who were asking questions could have mentioned their names, because some of them I know them, some of them I don't, but it would actually increase our conversations. I was just intrigued in closing, these are my final comments, about who is in charge, that question. And the answer that says, the people are in charge. But I think the people of South Africa, most of them, have degraded to victimhood and helplessness. And I think we actually do not need to ask permission for anything. If we say we are what we want, you cannot ask anybody permission to be right or whatever. You need to take the power in your own hands. We need to do something. We do not need to expect that we will have, because sometimes we expect that at the end of the day, we must have unanimity. There's a concept that I think people attribute it to South Africa. They call it sufficient consensus, which is saying, yes, we will not always agree, but we need to be moving in the same direction, lest we become, I like this concept of being checkmated, because then it means we then say the system is packed against us, and therefore we have nothing to do. They must give us the permission to complain. They must give us the last word, as I thank everybody and your participation, is that we must never forget the struggle continues. Thank you.
We are inviting you for dinner. It's a late dinner. However, all of us are going to have a meal. It's a buffet. As we leave here, we're going to pick up meal and come back to the tables and have our meal here. But before we do that, we're going to ask Reverend Munyebudi to pronounce benediction, bless us and the meal, give thanks for the meal, and we are going to go in lines. These tables are in lines. We're going to start Julius Nyerere, Nelson Mandela, Kofi Annan. They open first. And then we come to the second, which is, what's there, Woodstow? Ngwame. Oh, we have given you a giant. Kenneth Kaunda, Patrice Lumumba, we go second. And there is another line over there, Yabo Samora Machel and others, we go. In the foundation, we are trying to promote African leadership. And that's why you don't have
Sorry, Moruti. Brethren, let's give thanks to the Almighty God who made this to happen. Let's pray. Father Lord, the night has fallen. We give thanks, honor, and glory to you, because if you were not here, we were not going to accomplish this. We thank you, O Lord God, as we will be departing. Jehovah, make us arrive to our respective destination safely so. We dedicate our lives unto you. As we'll be going to the kitchen to eat, O Lord God, bless the food that will be eaten to strengthen our bodies and minds. Father Lord, bless us and keep us. May your face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May your face shine upon us and give us peace in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen and amen. God bless you.